The politicization of economic data. Examining the implications of political appointments to statistical agencies, this document examines the critical implications of political appointments to economic statistical agencies, with particular focus on recent developments at the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Through analysis of academic literature, international comparisons, and institutional frameworks, this study demonstrates that politicization of statistical agencies poses significant risks to data integrity, market stability, and democratic governance. The appointment of E.J. Antony from a Heritage Foundation to lead the Bureau of Labor Statistics represents a watershed moment that could fundamentally alter the relationship between politics and economic data. The foundation of statistical independent statistical agencies have historically operated under principles of professional independence, methodological rigor, and political neutrality. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, established in 1884, serves as the principal fact-finding agency for the federal government in the broad field of labor economics and statistics, building its reputation on these foundations through sophisticated methodologies for measuring employment, inflation, productivity, and other key economic indicators. The Bureau of Labor Statistics executes its statistical mission with independence, serving its users by providing products and services that are accurate, objective, relevant, timely, and accessible. The commissioner position requires demonstrated experience in independently and apolitically guiding the design and development of concepts, methods, and outputs of statistical programs, and the ability to maintain real and apparent objectivity and impartiality at all times, as the commissioner should be an apolitical appointment. Methodological integrity. Data collection and analysis follow established scientific principles rather than political preferences, ensuring results reflect reality rather than desired outcomes. Professional staff and career civil servants with expertise in statistics and economics, rather than political appointees, handle the technical aspects of data production and analysis. Transparent processes. Public scrutiny of methodologies and revisions builds trust in the accuracy and reliability of the data, allowing for verification and validation. These principles have established the Bureau of Labor Statistics as one of the most respected statistical agencies in the world, known for its methodological rigor, independence, and transparency, according to the Economic Policy Institute. This reputation has been built over decades of consistent, reliable reporting that serves as the foundation for countless economic decisions both domestically and internationally. The integrity of economic data serves as the bedrock of modern financial markets, policy decisions, and global economic coordination. When statistical agencies maintain independence and professional standards, they provide the reliable information that governments, businesses, and investors need to make informed decisions. However, recent developments have raised significant concerns about the potential politicization of economic data collection and reporting. International standards for statistical agencies' SE frameworks provide the foundation for reliable economic information that markets tie and credibility across time and between nations. One U.S. Statistical Policy Directive's domestic guidelines that establish protocols for federal statistical agencies, ensuring methodological consistency and professional standards across government departments. Two National Academies Principles. The Principles and Practices for a Federal Statistical Agency document provides authoritative guidance on maintaining independence, objectivity, and scientific integrity in statistical work. Three UN Fundamental Principles. The United Nations Fundamental Principles of Official Statistics establish global standards for statistical agencies, emphasizing professional independence, impartiality, and scientific methodology. OECD standards. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development provides frameworks for statistical practice that promote comparability and reliability across developed economies. Eurostat, the statistical office of the European Union, exemplifies these principles by promoting key values including respect and trust, fostering excellence, promoting innovation, service orientation, professional independence. This demonstrates the international recognition of these principles as fundamental to effective economic governance. Research by Auerbach highlights that these standards exist precisely because manipulation of official statistics is a worldwide problem, and that in many countries professional statisticians grapple with regimes that seek to tamper with statistical production to advantage their policies and leaders. The establishment of clear international standards serves as a bulwark against such manipulation. The adherence to these standards has historically set apart developed economies from those with less reliable statistical systems. When statistical agencies follow these principles, they produce data that can be trusted by markets, policymakers, and citizens alike. Conversely, when these standards are compromised, the resulting data becomes suspect, potentially leading to market inefficiencies, policy mistakes, and erosion of public trust. The Heritage Foundation appointment, and its context the appointment of E.J. Antony, chief economist of the conservative Heritage Foundation think tank, to lead the Bureau of Lab or Statistics represents a significant departure from traditional appointments to this position. This appointment has raised substantial concerns among economists and statistical experts about the potential politicization of what has historically been an independent, nonpartisan agency. Antony has served as chief economist for the Heritage Foundation, which was the primary architect behind Project 2025, a comprehensive conservative blueprint for Republican presidential administrations. His background at a politically aligned think tank contrasts sharply with the typical profile of BLS commissioners, who generally come from academic or professional statistical backgrounds with demonstrated commitments to methodological rigor rather than political advocacy. Of particular concern to statistical experts is Antony's history of questioning the legitimacy of the agency's data. He has been a frequent critic of BLS data collection methods, once calling a methodology change for the Consumer Price Index an Orwellian trick to mask higher inflation in a blog post. Such statements suggest a potential predisposition to view statistical methodologies through a political lens rather than a scientific one. University of Michigan economics professor Justin Wolfers characterized Antony as disastrously terrible, with few credentia ls beyond a long history of misrepresenting or misunderstanding basic economic statistics, and noted he has demonstrated no commitment to truth. The circumstances surrounding Antony's appointment are equally concerning. His selection came after President Trump fired the previous BLS commissioner, Erica McIntarfer, hours after the Bureau's July jobs report. The president accused McIntarfer without evidence of incompetence and of having an ulterior motive for allegedly altering employment figures. This unprecedented dismissal of a sitting commissioner following the release of economic data that did not align with political narratives sets a troubling precedent. William Beach, a former Trump-appointed BLS commissioner, criticized the firing as totally groundless and warned it sets a dangerous precedent and undermines the statistical mission of the Bureau, while escalating unprecedented attacks on the independence and integrity of the federal statistical system. The fact that a former Trump appointee expressed such concerns underscores the unusual nature of these developments and their potential implications for statistical integrity. Political economy and policy implementation research demonstrates that some governments have handed off control of important policies to independent bodies that are less subject to day-to-day political pressures such as central banks and public health agencies. This institutional design reflects the understanding that professional independence enhances policy effectiveness and credibility. The separation of certain technical functions from direct political control has become a hallmark of modern governance precisely because it produces more reliable outcomes. Academic studies have examined how government partisanship shapes monetary policy bureaucrats' inflation forecasts and documented the importance of measuring the independence of central banks and its effects on policy outcomes. These findings suggest that political influence can systematically bias technical analyses, even in institutions designed to be independent. Political influence, when political considerations drive statistical methodologies and reporting, data becomes aligned with partisan narratives rather than objective reality. Data distortion politically influenced data collection and analysis can lead to systematic biases in economic indicators, misrepresenting actual economic conditions. Policy failures decisions based on politically distorted data lead to suboptimal policies that fail to address actual economic conditions and challenges. Eroded trust as data credibility diminishes, markets, policymakers, and citizens lose confidence in official statistics, undermining economic stability. The independence of statistical agencies parallels the independence of central banks, which has been extensively studied. Just as central bank independence has been shown to produce better monetary policy outcomes by insulating decisions from short-term political pressures, statistical independence produces more reliable economic data by ensuring that methodologies follow scientific principles rather than political expedients. When statistical agencies become politicized, the resulting data distortions can lead to cascading policy failures. Policymaker errors may respond to economic conditions that don't actually exist, markets may misallocate resources based on faulty information, and the public may lose trust in government institutions more broadly. These consequences extend far beyond the immediate political gains that might be sought through data manipulation. The potential politicization of the Bureau of Labor Statistics thus represents not merely a technical concern, but a fundamental challenge to effective governance and economic stability. The integrity of economic data is essential for the proper functioning of both markets and government, making the independence of statistical agencies a matter of significant public interest. Market implications of statistical politicization. The Bureau of Labor Statistics describes its work as independent and nonpartisan, with this impartiality being key to the public and market's trust in the data, which influences the price of money not just in the U.S., but around the world, and is touted as gold standard for economic statistics. The potential loss of this trusted data source would have far-reaching implications for global financial markets that rely on accurate U.S. economic indicators. Edwards warns that the loss of highly reliable, accurate, and transparent data on the health of the world's largest economy would be perilous, as for the first time, the Commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics has been fired by the President of the United States for political reasons, launching the $30 trillion economy into uncharted and dangerous territory. This unprecedented action creates uncertainty about the future reliability of U.S. economic data. Market pricing mechanisms. Financial markets rely on accurate economic data to price assets efficiently. Bond markets, in particular, are highly sensitive to employment and inflation data. When the credibility of this data comes into question, market participants may add risk premiums to compensate for increased uncertainty, potentially raising borrowing costs throughout the economy. Former Trump-nominated BLS Commissioner William Beach warned precisely about this dynamic. Suppose that they get a new commissioner, and they do a bad number. Well, everybody's going to think, well, it's not as bad as it probably really is, because they're going to suspect political influence. So this is damaging. Global economic coordination. U.S. economic data serves as a critical input for global economic coordination. Central banks, international financial institutions, and multinational corporations all rely on accurate U.S. data to inform their own decisions. When this data becomes suspect, the efficiency of global economic coordination diminishes. The potential politicization of U.S. economic statistics could lead to a scenario where international actors begin to discount or disregard U.S. data, developing alternative indicators or relying more heavily on private sector data. This would represent a significant loss of U.S. economic influence and could complicate international economic cooperation. The market implications extend beyond immediate pricing effects to longer-term structural concerns. If statistical politicization becomes entrenched, it could lead to a gradual erosion of the U.S. dollar's status as the global reserve currency, as this status depends partly on the transparency and reliability of U.S. economic governance. International investors might gradually shift assets to jurisdictions with more reliable economic data, potentially raising U.S. borrowing costs over time. Furthermore, the politicization of economic data could create a feedback loop where market participants increasingly rely on private sector alternatives, further undermining the relevance of official statistics and potentially creating information asymmetries that benefit sophisticated market participants at the expense of the general public and smaller investors. International comparisons of statistical integrity. The potential politicization of U.S. statistical agencies can be better understood by examining international examples where political interference has compromised data integrity. These comparisons provide valuable insights into the potential consequences of allowing political considerations to influence statistical methodologies and reporting. Argentina, under President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, Argentina's National Statistics Agency Index was widely accused of manipulating inflation statistics to show lower rates than independent economists estimated. This led to a loss of credibility in official data, the emergence of parallel private inflation estimates, and eventually contributed to economic instability and higher borrowing costs for the government. Greece's statistical agency was found to have systematically underreported government deficits prior to the country's debt crisis. This manipulation contributed to the severity of Greece's economic collapse when the true state of public finances was revealed, leading to a loss of market access and necessitating international bailouts. Venezuela. The Venezuelan central bank stopped regularly publishing economic data as the country's economic crisis deepened, making it difficult for markets and citizens to assess true economic conditions. This lack of transparency contributed to economic mismanagement and hyperinflation. These international examples demonstrate that when statistical agencies lose independence, the consequences extend far beyond technical concerns about data quality. In each case, the politicization of statistics contributed to broader economic instability, loss of market confidence, and ultimately worse outcomes for citizens. The United States has historically been viewed as having among the most reliable statistical systems in the world, with agencies like the Bureau of Labor Statistics serving as models for other countries. This reputation for statistical integrity has contributed to the U.S. dollar's status as the global reserve currency and to the relatively low borrowing costs enjoyed by the U.S. government. Research by Auerbach indicates that manipulation of official statistics is a worldwide problem, and that in many countries professional statisticians grapple with regimes that seek to tamper with statistical production to advantage their policies and leaders. The United States has generally been considered an exception to this pattern, with its statistical agencies maintaining professional independence despite changes in political administration. The potential shift toward greater political influence over U.S. statistical agencies thus represents not just a domestic concern, but a potential realignment of the United States toward practices more commonly associated with countries that have less developed institutional safeguards. This would mark a significant departure from a historical position of the United States as a leader in statistical integrity and transparency. Institutional safeguards and monitoring in response to growing concerns about the politicization of statistical agencies, various institutional safeguards and monitoring mechanisms have been proposed or implemented. These efforts aim to preserve the integrity of economic data even in the face of political pressures. Researchers at the American Statistical Association and George Mason University are leading efforts to independently monitor the health of the U.S. statistical system and aim to modernize the centuries-old role of the American Statistical Association from reacting to threats facing the federal statistical system to proactively tracking government operations. This represents an important shift toward more active oversight of statistical integrity. Legislative protections strengthening legal frameworks that protect the independence of statistical agencies, including clear statutory mandates for professional rather than political appointments and explicit protections against interference in methodologies. Independent monitoring establishing or enhancing independent bodies that can leverage the growing volume of publicly available administrative data to raise the visibility of challenges facing the federal statistical system, not just political interference, but other threats such as chronic underfunding. Professional standards reinforcing professional standards and ethics within statistical agencies, including clear guidelines for maintaining independence from political influence and protocols for reporting attempted interference. Transparency mechanisms implementing enhanced transparency requirements that make methodological changes and revisions more visible to the public and to independent experts who can evaluate their scientific validity. These safeguards are particularly important because, as experts at the Economic Policy Institute warn, political interference undermines the fundamental reliability of economic data. These data are the product of careful work by hundreds of expert economists, statisticians, and civil servants following transparent, well-established methodologies. When political considerations override these methodologies, the resulting data becomes less reliable for all users. International organizations also play an important role in maintaining statistical standards. The International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the United Nations Statistical Commission all provide frameworks and assessments that can help identify deviations from best practices. These international standards serve as an important external reference point for evaluating the integrity of domestic statistical systems. However, institutional safeguards face significant challenges when political pressures become intense. The effectiveness of these mechanisms depends on broader democratic norms and the willingness of political leaders to respect the independence of technical agencies. When these norms erode, even well-designed institutional safeguards may prove insufficient to maintain statistical integrity. The role of civil society and academia beyond formal institutional safeguards, civil society organizations, and academic institutions play a crucial role in monitoring and preserving statistical integrity. These non-governmental actors can provide independent verification, technical expertise, and public advocacy that complement official mechanisms for maintaining statistical independence. Academic oversight, academic economists, and statisticians serve as important independent validators of official statistics. When methodological changes occur, academic experts can evaluate these changes based on scientific merit rather than political considerations. This academic scrutiny creates an important check on potential politicization. Universities and research institutions also train the next generation of statistical professionals, instilling values of methodological rigor and professional independence that can carry forward into government statistical agencies. This educational role helps maintain a culture of statistical integrity across generations. Civil society monitoring non-governmental organizations focused on government transparency, economic policy, and democratic institutions can monitor statistical agencies for signs of political interference. These organizations can raise public awareness when concerns arise and advocate for maintaining statistical independence. Professional associations like the American Statistical Association and the American Economic Association also play important roles in establishing and maintaining professional standards. These associations can provide collective voices for statistical professionals when political pressures threaten to compromise methodological integrity. The media also serves a critical function in preserving statistical integrity by reporting on potential politicization and explaining the importance of independent economic data to the public. Investigative journalism can uncover attempts to influence statistical methodologies for political purposes, while economic journalism can help citizens understand why statistical integrity matters for their everyday lives. In some cases, civil society organizations have developed alternative data sources that can serve as checks on official statistics. For example, during periods when Argentina's official inflation statistics were widely considered unreliable, private economists developed alternative inflation measures that provided more accurate assessments of price changes. While such alternatives are not ideal substitutes for reliable official statistics, they can provide important reality checks when official data comes into question. The combination of academic expertise, civil society monitoring, media scrutiny, and professional associations creates a multi-layered ecosystem for preserving statistical integrity. This ecosystem becomes particularly important during periods when formal institutional safeguards face political pressure, providing additional lines of defense for the independence and reliability of economic data. Academic research, independent validation of methodologies, and results through peer-reviewed research and analysis by statistical experts. Media coverage, investigative reporting on statistical agencies, and explanatory journalism about the importance of data integrity. Professional associations' establishment and enforcement of professional standards, and collective advocacy for statistical independence. Conclusion. Preserving the foundation of economic governance, the integrity of economic data represents a fundamental pillar of modern democratic governance and market-based economies. When statistical agencies maintain independence from political influence, they provide the reliable information that governments, businesses, and citizens need to make informed decisions. Conversely, when these agencies become subject to political interference, as critics suggest with the Antony appointment, the risk emerges of producing economic statistics comparable to unreliable systems in other countries. The unprecedented firing of a BLS commissioner for political reasons has launched the economy into uncharted and dangerous territory with the potential for perilous consequences. This development represents not merely a technical concern, but a fundamental challenge to the institutional architecture that supports economic stability and democratic governance. Market stability. Financial markets depend on reliable economic data to function efficiently. When this data becomes politicized, market participants may add risk premiums to compensate for increased uncertainty, potentially raising borrowing costs throughout the economy. Policy effectiveness. Effective economic policy requires accurate information about economic conditions. Politicized data can lead to misguided policies that fail to address actual economic challenges, potentially exacerbating rather than resolving economic problems. Democratic accountability. Citizens rely on accurate economic information to evaluate government performance. When this information becomes politicized, democratic accountability suffers as citizens cannot accurately assess economic outcomes. The preservation of statistical independence requires not only institutional safeguards but also active oversight by civil society, academia, and international observers committed to maintaining the factual foundation upon which democratic governance depends. This multi-layered approach to protecting statistical integrity becomes particularly important during periods of political polarization when formal safeguards may face increased pressure. As the United States navigates this critical juncture in the relationship between politics and economic data, the stakes extend far beyond any immediate political considerations. The long-term credibility of U.S. economic statistics, the efficiency of domestic and global markets, and the effectiveness of economic policy all depend on maintaining the independence and integrity of statistical agencies like the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The appointment of politically aligned individuals to key statistical positions represents a watershed moment that demands attention not just from economists and statisticians, but from all who value evidence-based governance and economic stability. The integrity of economic data is not merely a technical concern, but a fundamental requirement for the proper functioning of modern democratic capitalism.